and I will share the recording with everyone after this call. I will also be sure to send out a quick survey if you have any feedback or things for the workforce development team to consider in looking at additional webinars for our consultants, alumni, and our community across the U.S. With all of that being said, I'm going to turn things over to Brian. Again, please keep your lines muted unless you have a quick question, and also feel free to shoot me a note privately if there's any sort of technical issues that you may have, or if you have a question you would like for me to ask Brian on your behalf at the end. So Brian, I'm going to turn things over to you.
Okay, thanks. Hey everyone, hope everyone's doing well this afternoon. Give you a little background on myself before we kind of jump in here. So I am currently at Cisco as an investigations manager. I work with the SOC at RTP and the liaison between the customer and the SOC of their findings that we kind of alert to of how to secure their network or suspicious activities. Prior to that, I spent 1.5 years out in Afghanistan working for the Department of Defense with the U.S. Army, looking at basically standing up a SOC for them. SOC is a security operations center, looking for bad guys in real time with the Afghanistan network. Did that again for 1.5 years. Prior to that, was 2.5 years at Cisco. Again, as you guys can tell, I like Cisco. Was there as a tier 2 analyst and worked up to an investigator. During that time period was basically looking at logs, suspicious activities, doing hunts for bad guys, IOCs, or suspicious activities and that kind of stuff. And then I guess the time before that, just keep in the last 5 years, would be back in Afghanistan. I did 1.5 years as information security, basically vulnerabilities on the networks, patch managements for the sysadmins. Again, just looking at the best ways to harden the network to protect it. So kind of got a decent background all the way around when it comes to cybersecurity and whatnot. Reason why I kind of chose today's topic with ransomware is it's so relevant. It's so in the news, so to speak. I mean, this day and time, you can secure your network the best you can, but the adversary is, always trying to get in. They'll find that 0 day, they'll find that loophole. And with cybersecurity, there's never a dull moment. So with ransomware, again, there's a lot of the news lately of ransomware being big companies being hit, and I'm kind of go through that process of kind of how ransomware has evolved. I'm taking a pretty high level approach because we only have about 45 minutes to actually do the presentation, where if you went into each threat actor, every type of ransomware there is would be days and days and days. So again, I went kind of a high level. I think somebody's got a hot mic. If you could mute yourself, please. All right. So with that said, what is ransomware? So ransomware is basically a malicious software malware that locks users out from devices or blocks access to files until a sum of money, which is ransom, is paid. Pretty pretty old term. I mean, piracy days and stealing, or pirate days, stealing, goods and merchants and then reselling it. That's kind of the inspiration for this, webinar. So the evolution of ransomware. So ransomware has been around for 30 years. It's only gotten national attention probably within the last 3 to 5. Again, the latest one being Garmin. Garmin was actually hit about 2 weeks ago, had a $10 bounty for their data and to get their systems back up and running. So that kind of made it in the local news, so to speak. But back in 1989, the first ransomware was actually an AIDS Trojan. The developer of this one sent out 2,000 diskettes, sent them to attendees of the World Health Organization International AIDS in Stockholm. Basically, people put the disk on in, and it went through and hid files, kind of locked them out, moved some stuff around. And to get the file access back, he basically wanted them to mail out $189 to a P.O. box in Panama. I'm not sure if he took money orders or not, but that was the first quote-unquote documented ransomware. This one wasn't too bad. It uses symmetric cryptology. So if you're familiar with cryptology, symmetric uses both same keys to encrypt and decrypt. So it's not necessarily real hard to break. So that was the first ransomware back in 1989. Jump up to 2005. So this was the first ransomware where we start seeing programs showing up using asymmetric, where they're taking the symmetric keys that again that are identical, but using a asymmetric encryption or RSA, where you would need a private key to encrypt or decrypt the symmetric key. So that right there made it to the point where now you pretty much couldn't crack it yourself. You had to have other means, or again pay some kind of ransom. 2008, so Bitcoin emerged. This kind of was a game changer in the cryptocurrency. Beforehand, it was basically mailing, like in the first example, mailing to a PO box or using a Visa prepaid card and putting money on that card to get your ransom, or a particular website where you would go to pay it. Bitcoin kind of emerged as a cryptocurrency. It provided new, and I say mostly anonymous systems for transferring money. Widespread adoption of the Bitcoin enabled threat actors to actually carry out much larger ransomware attacks. They could get paid faster, had more of less chance of getting caught, because obviously if you're mailing to a PO box, somebody needs to be able to go there and check that PO box. So Bitcoin was kind of a game changer in the way that they were paid, and kind of catapulted again the larger scale attacks. 2013. So Crypto Locker, and again, I didn't use a whole lot of different malwares or ransomware software over the years because it gets really convoluted, and each one has their own little. Crypto Locker was the first cryptographic malware spread by downloads from a compromised site. For the most part, beforehand, it was basically a diskette you find on the street and you put in your computer or USB device. It was a mass emailing out into the wild, and people would just happen to click on it or whatnot. So it wasn't very didn't get drive-by, so to speak, as we call it. 2014, Cine Locker, it appeared in August. Unlike the others, which treated the end user devices, this one actually went for Synology network attached devices. So you're starting to see a shift here from basically the end user to more America, trying to get that data. So the evolution is going from one person paying me $189 to maybe 2 Bitcoins at this point in time, where maybe it was around $400. So the thought process is starting to shift. It's starting to evolve to corporate America, to small businesses, people with more deeper pockets than the good old end user back at the house. 2015, we actually saw criminal ransomware as a service, or RAS, make its debut. So basically, all you have to do is go to a Tor website and say, hey, I want this, this, and this, and creators of the site would actually give you the ransomware. And their kickback was they get 20% of whatever the Bitcoin ransomware payment was. So if you weren't very good at necessarily writing the script for, or the software for the ransoming side of it, but you were good at getting into the systems, you could actually not waste your time on the ransom side of it and just pay for the service. So again, 2015 kind of was a game changer as far as your team. You didn't have to be good from start to finish. You only had to be good at some point of it. And then the criminals on the RAS service would, kind of take the lead there. 2015 also saw criminal gangs that live off ransomware infection targeting small businesses, again, instead of consumers. Again, that shift in mindset, looking for the small to medium businesses where they are not looking at maybe their patching cycles, maybe they don't have a big infrastructure to keep everything secure. And then also 2015 saw a strand observed by by using remote desktop and terminal service attacks. 2016, we saw ransomware now hidden in Word files. So they're starting to evolve a little bit, trying to hit other types of file structures to spread their badness, so to speak. In 2016, also saw the mass spear phishing campaigns used to lure victims. The reason why they were kind of going this route is because corporate America has pretty good hygiene typically, in which case spear phishing, they can make it look a little more business-oriented emails, and end users are more likely to click on something that's customized to them, and there's a bigger payoff when you start looking at corporate America. Again, Garmin, a prime example of that with $10 million ransom there. 2000 shift in now threat actors are realizing that they're not necessarily getting a lot of pain or payment for their ransomware. So what they end up doing now is looking for ways to make them the only way to get their data back, or your data back, excuse me. So with that, threat actors are looking at deleting your backups. They're looking like deleting your shadow copies, local backups. They're looking at doing any cloud. This day and time, they're looking at cloud backups too, wiping it there. This way, again, once they encrypt that data, you're going to them to turn around and get it back. You're not going to and pay them. You're not going to pull from back. 2018, we saw developers of ransomware now stopping services. This is kind of a game changer too, because they're turning off services like Windows Defenders, firewalls, your antivirus solutions, your malware solutions. They're turning those off to basically to get across your network, lateral movement, affect as many machines as possible. Then 19, we saw data exfiltration. This one here is, I guess, ultimately probably the biggest change in ransomware, because what they're doing now basically is pulling the data, your sensitive data, and they're not looking for just emails from, I don't know, you and your best friend. They're looking for corporate secrets. They're looking for financial statements. They're looking for other businesses that you do business with, so they can compromise their systems. But they're pulling that data back, and they do it by the droves. I mean, terabytes. 10 terabytes is what supposedly was pulled back from Canon, who was just done hit with ransomware last week. So they're keeping this, and they're putting it off to the side. They're hitting the companies up saying, hey, listen, I just got 10 terabytes of your data, and if you don't pay me, I'm going to go ahead and release it. So depending on the data they get, it's also a security breach with like HIPAA, for example, PII. So now you have to notify customers of breaches and whatnot. Again, the philosophy has evolved originally from the end user, just a $189 to how can we get the most money bang for our buck, so to speak. So they're doing these ransoms. They're taking down the corporate networks. They're in there for quite a few weeks, depending on the threat actor. Sometimes they're in there months or years, not necessarily looking to deploy ransom, but to steal your secrets, to steal stuff that they can pull back and use for maybe their own clientele, because most ransomware people actually have a customer list, which is kind of crazy. So again, the mindset has kind of shifted, evolved 100 to a bigger bang for the buck, more impact, make their time worth it, so to speak. And then the last thing we're seeing currently in 2020 is threat actors are actually using Wake on Land, which is basically a command to wake up any machines that are sleeping on the corporate network, to basically wake them up and say, hey, you want this new software, here, get it. So they can infect as many machines as possible. And they're also doing this by hacking Active Directory to get the most number of machines there. So the reason why I kind of went evolution of ransomware is kind of give you a mindset when we start looking at some of these graphs and information coming up, gives you an idea of what or how it's being impacted in the corporate America. So typical ransomware infection flow. So the adversary is going to do, in this example, is going to do like a phishing campaign where they're going to send out a thing, link for maybe something with COVID, for example, where it's like, hey, when COVID first started, it's in your neighborhood, and here's the link to see the map of where it's at. So the end user would click that phishing campaign. Other ways that they could probably get in being the adversary would be RDP, remote desktop protocols, or VPNs, or some kind of software vulnerability. But again, in this example, I'm just using as a phishing attack. So the computer, once a user clicks on it, the computer goes out, pulls down basically a download or something like Emotet or Dridex. This now allows the adversary to get in your network. They're going to turn around and start doing the reconnaissance. They're going to start seeing ultimately what systems they need to hit first that's going to impact you the worst, so that you'll be willing to pay that money. And again, they're in your system, your networks for 3-4 weeks doing all this reconnaissance, trying to figure out again, how to make that critical blow to you. And I put in here possibly living off the land. So if you're not familiar with living off the land, it is using everyday tools and software that maybe your sysadmins, your net admins are using for pushing out software like, for example, PS Exec or something, Cobalt Strike, or just tools that you can go buy on the shelf that antiviruses are not going to flag as being malicious, that they're not going to draw any attention to the security team on the network because it's known usage within your environment. But after they plan the attack, that's when the action the plan goes into action. They're looking at deleting your backups. Again, they're looking for local, they're looking for attached networks, shadow copies, but they're going through and deleting those backups. While those backups are deleting, they're also looking around to see what company secrets you got, what kind of data they can pull back and use as leverage for that payment. Ultimately, if you don't pay them, they're not making anything. So again, they're looking for to make their time as relevant as possible. Once all this is done, then they're basically going to turn around and set that malware free. So at that time, your systems are getting encrypted, and you're going to be have a little pop-up window that pops up on a Monday morning when you log back in the office that your computer's been hit. All right. So now bringing all this into a nutshell, what we're looking at, and this is Q1 versus Q2 of 2020. So if you look, we had COVID start February-ish. So a couple of the threat actors, Maze and Doppelganger, actually had a conscience, we'll say, and went ahead and said they were not going to target hospitals with COVID. Hospitals and universities and government are usually big sites or a big game for adversaries because they need that data. They need to be able to flow. They need to make the, for example, hospitals, the research for COVID, for clinical trials and all that stuff, it hangs there. So, but those two threat actors decided they were not going to go after healthcare during that time period. You can see it was almost a 4% drop. Professional services actually ended up going up in Q2. A lot of these actually went up. Again, they just kind of shifted one location to the other. Corporate America, again, is the theme of, the new theme, so to speak. So top threat ransom actors in Q2. So the top three, Sodin, Maze, and Phobos, are the big players. The other ones are actually coming up. Ryuk has been around for a while. Phobos is actually a RAS, again, ransomware as a service, where Maze and Sodin they're their own teams. And, Maze is one of the first ones that we saw actually doing exfiltrating data. So they're one of the ones who are, I guess you would say, the pioneers for the ransomware direction of pulling the data back, and again, using that as extra leverage to make sure that you're paying. And that's not saying that too, they don't sell that data to a third party, because once your data is on the internet, I mean, it's never going away. So again, they could have ulterior motives too by selling it to a third party in the background that you would never know. So the ransomware attacks by vectors. So again, we kind of touched on RDP compromising, and these are for the last basically 2 years. If you want to look, you can see there's a trend where RDP compromise kind of went down, and then it kind of came back up towards COVID. Could you attribute that to work from homes? Corporate America was getting pretty secure in their posture at the office, but when the COVID hit and everyone's kind of split out to work from homes, now also made a bigger liability for the companies. Two vulnerabilities that were out was for the Pulse and VPN and Citrix gateways. Those were real big that threat actors were getting into and getting into the corporate America through that channel. Email phishing, again, back in Q3 in 2019, it had its peak, kind of dipped down towards the holidays in Q4. Part of that is Emotet, who does a lot of emailing campaigns. They actually take a break during the holidays, 3 or 4 weeks. So that's one attribute to why it peaked so low. But again, you start seeing towards the end of Q1, Q2, again, COVID being out there, the disinformation campaigns that we were seeing, the threat actors were getting on that. And then again, software vulnerabilities. It's pretty low for the most part in this day and time compared to the other ones, but RDP and email are definitely the two that ransomware are looking, or threat actors are looking to get into. So if you break down the top three, how they're really getting in. So Sodin is using 21% of the phishing email campaigns, and they're using a lot of RDP compromise with software vulnerability. Maze is again one of the big threat actors. They're going after a lot of corporate America. They're going after the big organizations. They're doing those spear phishing campaigns, trying to get the CEOs, the vice presidents, the HR departments, legal departments, again, to click on the links. So they can find, once they get in and you click on the link, they can use your Active Directory stuff to get their foothold in, and in which case they're going to try to elevate credentials and get on in. Once they get their admin credentials, get on in and then start that process. All right. And Phobos. Phobos, again, is the RAS service. So a lot of them are going after very small businesses, 10, 15 employee businesses and that kind of thing. So 100% of them is basically RDP compromised, trying to get on in remote desktop. So that one's kind of not a shocker to see that they just specialize in only the RDP compromises. All right, so theming this back to COVID. So what do we see during the COVID few months of 2020 all the way up until June was when the statistics were ran. So a lot of it's COVID information, or should I say fake COVID information. Again, ultimately you're trying to get the end user to click on a link. The concept really hasn't changed. It's the same emails we were getting before COVID where, hey, here's your FedEx packaging number, here's your tracking number, or here's the invoice for this. The same kind of emails we're seeing, but now they're relating it to the COVID time where everyone was looking to figure out how close was COVID at my house, how COVID was affecting shutdowns and work from homes and that kind of stuff. So a lot of it was COVID information, fake COVID response policies for maybe your work, fake government orders, discounts for online service kind of stuff. And even some APT, advanced persistent threat groups, basically nation state actors were using PlugX and AP for the mouse spam attachments. ID thefts, we saw hard luck stories. Hey, listen, gotta get some money, that kind of thing going out. Mouse spam linking to phishing sites, search engine poisoning with for infection maps, masks, respirators, and that kind of stuff. With the switch to work from home, a lot of VPNs, remote desktop, and software security. Saw some Trojanizing stuff where they were installing a product they were claiming to be VPN, but also installed a remote info steal or maybe coin miner, and then of course ransomware. BEC, business email compromise, sent for COVID, basically was where a threat actor gets on in and they're like, hey, send you an email to your corporate. Deposit this money in this account for this closing. We've had a problem with it. So at the last minute, they're changing that, where that money needs to deposit. Again, I touched on earlier, misinformation. A lot of it is fake, just trying to spread rumors and whatnot. But again, if you're trying to get your end user to click, that definitely does work. DDoS, we saw some DDoSes against U.S. governments, the U.S. Health and Services, and then we also, some healthcare organizations got that. And like I touched on before, exploit and dictionary attacks on VPNs, remote desktop, and Citrix servers. That was real big when COVID first hit, and everyone was, again, changing their work from in-office to work from home. Oops. Wow, I got a little click happy there. Sorry about that. All right, so kind of a little visualization with email attachments, with COVID file names. As you can tell, really nothing, a couple peaks in the mid-February, but then it kind of went off the scale, so to speak, starting in March. Again, a lot of this was trying to get you to click that link, trying to get you to download that thing, that attachment. Maybe it was maybe it was a macro-enabled worksheet where you clicked on something and it would pull down the adversary's, again, DriveX or something like that in the background as a downloader. Let me click one time. All right. So what does it mean with ransomware metrics? So the average downtime, this is up at the end of quarter two, the average downtime is 16 days. Doesn't sound like a whole lot, but this is small business. This is not corporate America. You would actually gauge that like Canon, like Garmin, if they turned around and didn't pay that ransomware, you look at months. TravelX is one of them who didn't pay the ransom. and they were trying to rebuild from backups and whatnot, and they were down for quite a while. So the average downtime, again, 16 days, up 8%. The average ransomware now paid is 178,000. That's up 6 just from Q1. Again, you got some big names in there that have had to do some payouts, kind of adjusting the numbers, but the average size company is only 100 employees. So if you think about it, $170,000 to a company that has 100 employees is a pretty substantial chunk of change. And then in Q2, we saw exfiltrating of data and deploying ransomware up to 22%, which again is 8% more than Q1 of 2020. So that's a pretty good jump. Again, I think this is more of the insurance policy, so to speak, for the ransomware people when they turn around and get your files that they can get and you leverage. One thing I wanted to put in here too with the metrics, I made a comment earlier about when you come in Monday morning, you see the little lock screen on your computer. Most ransomware actually happen on a Friday night or during the weekend. Reason thought for that is that everyone who's working, they, security people and all that aren't monitoring the systems, and gives the threat actors 48, maybe 72 hours to actually get into to deploy their ransomware, to get it across the network, and again, causes much pain. So when you come on in Monday morning, you guys are in full effect with lockdown. So we talk about, all the various of ransomware, of, the bad guys and what they're doing, but what can you do to help prevent attack? A lot of it's training your people, train them not to click those sites, train them to, something looks suspicious, not to forward it or anything like that. And, pick up the phone and call the security team. Have offsite backups. And I put test to make sure they are good, because it was, I read an article where 55% of all backups that are taken are never tested, and they are actually faulty. So if you thought you had offsite backups and you go to restore and you don't have them, that's kind of no sense of having the backup there. Just limit the scope of attack. I mean, use good network segmentation. Have a monitoring SIMS tool or possibly a SOC, depending on the size of your company, and have a plan in place of what to do in case of an attack. If you don't know what to do or what the steps should be, then it's kind of like running around with chicken head cut off. You need to have a plan of action of, here's the steps, here's the people that are notified, here's our systems that are, need to come back online first, because we're losing, $1 million a day in revenue based on every system that's down. And then the last thing that up here, good cyber hygiene. We should always have this anyways. Patching, make sure your systems are up to date, make sure all systems have antivirus and anti-malware software installed, and of course it's updated. Disable accounts that are no longer used. Have a complex password rule, and then definitely use two-factor authentication. A lot of things, when the adversaries are in your network looking for a particular, or they get access to a user's account who clicked a phishing campaign, the email that was sent through, they can elevate their privileges because there's no two-factor authentication needed within the environment. So they're really able to get in, elevate, change their credentials to be now admin, and then kind of go from there. And one thing the adversary will do, forgot to mention, is when they're downloading and first coming into the network, they're going to put another software in to make it resilient. So after a restart, it'll open back up, and it'll still give them that gateway back into your company. So again, the ransomware people have thought about it through over the years. And we've gone from diskettes to $100 to $189 to pay me, to now being, an email sent from, a threat actor in North Korea. And I say North Korea because they have a pretty active APT group that does use a lot of these ransomware attacks to offset the sanctions that the U.S. and other countries have put against them. And to give you an idea, I read an article this morning in preparing some of these slides that ransomware is a $2 billion industry as of this year. So that's pretty healthy. And again, it's not going away. It's one of those things where, if you are into cybersecurity and you like this kind of never-ending challenge of trying to stay one step ahead of everyone, then I would definitely recommend, ransomware, because again, it's definitely where everything, so to speak, is at. Again, this one I kind of went a little higher level, didn't necessarily go through threat actors. When I started really pulling back the sleeves and seeing what was there, this may be a series that if Select Group wants to, we can continue with other types of ransomwares and actually get into the threat actors, advanced persistent groups that are government sponsored, again, whether it's Russia, China, South Korea, North Korea, threat actors, how they get in and do it. But I was just trying to give a high level, more look of, again, the thought process, how ransom changed over the years, and kind of, again, the future, where it's going. Obviously, it's corporate America. It's the bigger targets, the bigger companies, to get the bigger paycheck. I mean, again, $10 million for a ransom, and if it only took them, I say only, but if it only took them 3 months, that's a pretty good sized paycheck there. So, all right, and then of course sources from some of those graphs and whatnot. Because at Cisco, we do not keep any kind of metrics like that. At this point in time, yeah, I actually talked a little faster than I thought it was. So sorry about that. At this point in time, open up for questions or anything else I can provide.
Thank you, Brian. I will open things up. Feel free to unmute your line, or if you would like to send a question to me in private chat, you're welcome to do that if you're in a place where you're not able to ask a question. Give it a couple of minutes for Q&A or for general discussion.
Hey, Brian, Krishna here. I had a quick question. Do you have any recommendations for home-based security? How to prevent these attacks?
So for home base, are you talking about just like 1 or 2 computers and that kind of stuff? I mean, I'm sure you don't have your own little mini network. So I'm thinking you're talking about just end users and whatnot.
Yeah,
Okay.
mainly for home base. Employees working from home, and nobody have any firewalls like in corporate where they have Palo Alto or others. So do you have any recommendations or suggestions? How individuals can install something and make benefit out of this, prevent things like this?
Yeah, I mean, so definitely your endpoints should always have some kind of antivirus on it, and then with either paid subscription. Most of the vendors want you to, pay for it, the subscription side of it. I mean, because the definitions are only as good as your end systems are getting them. So I mean, McAfee's got them, Norton's got them. If you're a big clientele, Cisco would have them. But I would definitely do an endpoint solution as far as, again, antivirus. Have it scan. I would have it scan on demand as far as if you get an email that it turns around and looks at all your attachments. I would have it scan on a schedule and regularly download on a schedule. I can tell you with the DoD environment, we had that thing update 2 or 3 times a day, depending on where the feed was coming from. We would have that fast of threat actor or that fast of signatures updating. But again, AV solution is definitely the first thing to do. Another thing, to be honest with you, and I say this because I don't do it too often myself, most end users don't do backups of their systems. So I would do a backup maybe once a month as just a good rule of thumb. So in case for some reason you did get a malware on there that wiped your system, because there are some threat actors that they don't even ransom off your computer. I mean, or ransom the data they've taken off your computer. They're basically just wiping it, making it obsolete. So you lost everything on it. So I would definitely recommend a good backup. And it doesn't have to be to a cloud provider. You can go down to Best Buy and purchase an external, drive for $100, a 3 terabyte, and back off your data that's important to you. Stuff you can't get back. Possibly pictures, family events. I'm just looking at end users. Again, if you had some works that you brought home, that happened to be on the computer, or you were working with, maybe back that up. But again, a good backup, a good AV solution, so that if you did get compromised, you could fall back on. Those are probably going to be the easiest and best and most reasonable things for a small home to basically have to help protect yourself. And again, a lot of this too is educating. If that that email comes through and says you're winning lottery numbers, just educate. I've got a daughter who who just graduated college, and throughout the last probably 7 years, she's probably tired of me talking about cybersecurity to her. I do it all the time, but just trying to keep her educated, and she's a little less likely to click that button.
Thank you.
Yep.
Great presentation.
Thanks, Dan. So I guess going forward, so Lee's going to give some feedback and whatnot. This one I kept it kind of high level. Again, we'll look at the evolution of ransomware and then COVID and all that. Would the population who's jumped on the call today like to see something a little more in-depth? One of my partners was supposed to possibly do a presentation but got called off on it, so he may do a second round, in which case we could do follow-ups. Would there be I guess a desire to see something more, like I don't know, Maze threat actors or Doppelganger or Sodin, and what their threat attack vectors are? You could talk about IOCs, but they change, pretty much daily. Because again, they're always trying to evade the detection. So I'm just kind of curious, would you guys like to see something a little more in depth if we did a follow up to this one?
I would say yes.
Okay. All right. So again, I guess I'm just trying to figure out for the guy who might do it, or it may be me if they call me back, if I didn't, mess up too bad today. We can try to figure out maybe top 3 actors, but you can also do it based on threat groups too. I guess more to come with that. Give us, when you fill out the survey later on, give Lee some information of how you'd like to see it proceed, and we can kind of put something together for future presentations. Again, try to make this a little high level. Wasn't sure of the background of everyone on the call. Didn't want to, start out way in the weeds, and when some people didn't necessarily know where we're at. But again, I'm more happy to get more information and whatnot.
Appreciate that, Brian. Yeah, I'm seeing a couple of folks commenting in the chat. That's definitely something that they're interested in. So you and I can chat a little bit about scheduling and kind of get part 2 on the calendar for sure. I did see a question that just popped up about VPNs. There's a lot of VPNs advertised out there. Any recommendations on which ones to take a look at?
So VPNs, so when I was in Afghanistan, I used VPNs for all my connections out there. There's not one particular one that I would recommend. Obviously, it's keeping it patched, getting the latest information out there, or not information, excuse me, the latest security patch for it so that it's not vulnerable. A lot of them are relatively cheap too. You can buy a year's subscription for $30. So again, I'll use mine too when I'm in a public place. I'll flip it over to my phone and use it there. So I don't necessarily have one that I would to say go with this one. I don't get any kickbacks for sure. But we could possibly, just make sure that you're always getting the patching and the latest ones.
Great. And there's one other additional question, Brian, that just popped in. What federal policing is there to prevent and prosecute for the crime?
See, that's the amazing thing, because a lot of these threat actors are overseas. They're hitting in places that don't have any jurisdiction. You are seeing some groups that have actually gotten arrested in the last let's say last 6 to 8 months, where they're being traced back to it. Here in the States, a lot of it, I mean, we've got not regulatory, excuse me, we've got laws in the books for cyber crimes and that kind of stuff. But again, most of those threat actors are overseas. They are trying to jump through, and they may use 3 or 4 different hops to disguise where they're at. But a lot of them are in countries where there's not really much extradition, that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's a good question, and I would say it would all depend on the location physically of where they're at. Sometimes they being the authorities will trick the I guess threat actor, so to speak, to travel, and then they'll pick them up at the airport or whatnot. So they do get them that way, but again, it's kind of a cat and mouse game, so to speak.
All right. Well, gang, I will give you guys a couple of minutes back on your lunch break. Brian, we greatly appreciate you taking the time to speak with the team today. I will be sending out the recording this afternoon once that becomes available on my end. As Brian mentioned, your feedback is really important to us. If you have suggestions on additional topics that you'd like to see us discuss, or if you're interested yourself in serving as a presenter, we always welcome that as well. Feel free to put that in the survey. As always, if any of you need anything from the select group, feel free to reach out to me, Lee Wallace, at the select group, or experience@theselectgroup.com. We look forward to the next webinar in our series and hope you guys have a great rest of your week. Have a good one, guys.
Take care.
Bye, everyone.